While everyone's eyes are glued to AI, something huge is happening in the physical world. And it's coming out of a robotics startup in Munich, Germany, of all places. And trust me, Silicon Valley is definitely paying attention, to the tune of $100 million.
Yup, $100 million. That's the latest funding round for a company called RobCo. And look, that kind of cash isn't just an investment, right? It's a statement. It's telling us a major shift is happening in how we build things.
So that brings us to the big question here. Why is this German startup making some of the biggest names in tech, well, a little nervous? The answer, it turns out, isn't really about the robots themselves. It's about who gets to use them.
Okay, so to really get what RobCo is doing, you have to understand the problem they're solving first. For, decades, automating a factory was just insanely complex. It was ridiculously expensive and totally out of reach for pretty much any small or medium-sized business.
See, for the longest time, automation was this walled garden, right? Only the giants like KUKA and ABB, the ones with super deep pockets and armies of specialized engineers, could play. And here's the crazy part. The main barrier wasn't even the cost of the robot. It was the programming. You had to hire a highly paid robotics engineer who would then spend weeks, maybe even months, just coding one single, simple task. A small workshop? No way they could afford that.
Okay, so here's where RobCo's first bit of genius comes in. They totally rethought the hardware. Forget these complicated, rigid machines. They introduced a new philosophy, one built on radical simplicity, and it was inspired by something we all grew up with: Legos.
And this is the core idea, right here. Instead of one big, clunky machine, you have these self-contained modules. You can think of them like smart Lego blocks. Each joint, each piece, has its own little brain, its own processor and sensors. This creates what's called distributed intelligence, where every single part knows what it is and what it's connected to. It's a game changer.
So the process becomes incredibly simple. First, you figure out the task. Then you pick out the modules you need for that specific job. And finally, you just snap them together. The really crucial point here is this. If your needs change, you don't have to buy a whole new robot. You just reconfigure it. Need an extra joint for a more complex movement? Snap one on. Need a simpler arm for a different product line? Just take one off. It is literally that simple.
Now, as brilliant as that hardware is, RobCo's second innovation is, you could argue, even more revolutionary. Because they went after the single biggest barrier to entry, that complex programming we were talking about. They just got rid of it.
Just look at this breakdown. It's a total paradigm shift. I mean, we're going from the old way, complex programming, needing a specialized robotics engineer, weeks of setup, to the RobCo way, an intuitive tablet interface. The factory operator, the person who used to do the task by hand, can now automate it themselves, and they can do it in minutes, not weeks.
This quote just says it all. It's more like a mobile game than an industrial programming environment. I mean, think about that. They have this thing called teaching mode, where an operator can literally just grab the robot arm and physically move it through the motions of whatever task they need done. The software sees what you're doing and automatically calculates and saves the entire sequence. No code at all.
So this huge shift, right, from complex code to just intuitive control, it has a massive impact on the actual people on the factory floor. And it directly tackles one of the biggest fears people have about all this automation stuff.
Yeah, this one. Are robots taking our jobs? It's the question that's always in the room whenever we talk about this technology. But what's actually happening here is way more nuanced and honestly a lot more optimistic than you might think.
So instead of just replacing workers, this kind of technology is actually solving critical labor shortages, especially in places like Germany, where factories were literally at risk of closing down. It's upskilling the existing workers, turning them from manual laborers into robot fleet managers. And because it makes automation so much more affordable, it's actually allowing companies to bring manufacturing back to their home countries. That's a process called reshoring. Plus, you get less human error, better safety, and people are freed up from those super repetitive, physically draining tasks.
All right, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. How does RobCo's whole strategy stack up against some of the other big names in robotics, like, let's say, Tesla? And this right here is so key to understanding their success. You've got Tesla building this incredibly visionary general-purpose humanoid robot, the Optimus, that's probably still years away from being used in the real world, and then you have RobCo, who are completely pragmatic.
Their robots aren't flashy, they don't look like people, but they are in factories right now solving real problems and, making money.
And that $100 million in funding? That's not just for more factories. Oh no, it's for developing the next generation of lightweight modules that are designed to expand into totally new areas. We're talking about robots in supermarkets stocking shelves, in restaurants preparing food, even in hospitals moving equipment around. They're going after repetitive tasks everywhere.
When you boil it all down, the story of RobCo is really the victory of pragmatism over pure imagination. It's a story about solving today's problems with technology that's accessible and clever, instead of just waiting for some far-off sci-fi future to arrive. They're proving that the most powerful revolution isn't always the one that makes the most noise.
The takeaway here is pretty clear. This kind of tech isn't coming, it's already here. And it's changing the very definition of what work even is. RobCo has made the tools simple enough for anyone to use, but that leaves us all with a really critical question. Technology, as we know, doesn't wait for anyone. So the question is, how will we adapt?